Welcome to the podcast, Eye for Talent, the show where we've got an eye for talent. Or, you know what? Actually, hold on. No, scratch that. No, this is the show where I scour the internet far and wide and look for people who do cool shit. It used to be the podcast where we had an eye for talent, and that's still kind of the case. But I think now, since I've branched away from that to just find people who do cool shit or did cool shit, that's not necessarily pertaining to talents, that's going to be the new mantra. So, yeah, that's what that is. If you let me continue on with the regular part of it, I'm your host, Dylan, aka DJ Cyril Sauce. I'm a YouTube content creator, Twitch streamer, podcast host, producer. What else do I do? I don't know. Look at all the links in the description, because that's definitely where you go first when you start listening to a podcast, is right to the description. Joining me is my good friend Dakota. I definitely teased this last time in the previous episode, not the previous episode, the one before it, because he is a man of many things, but what I'm here to talk with him about is his most recent trip abroad to the wonderful and potentially fetishized country of Japan. So, hello.
Hi, I'm Dakota.
I
I went to Japan to study abroad and finish my minor in Japanese.
Oh, okay. So that was like I was gonna say that was your final step. No, that just happened to be coinciding with the fact that like your semester basically ended when you came back. I would think, right?
Kinda. I mean, I actually took classes while there and was learning Japanese from my professor from my college, but also from Japanese professors at the college I was visiting.
Right. Yeah, no, that all makes sense. So that actually immediately that instantly answers the first question. What were you going there for?
Oh, yeah. I was just over winter of 2022, so right before 2023, my professor put out a post about Japanese study abroad being offered for the first time since COVID started. And I missed the winter session, but there was the summer session. And after asking for help from all of my family and, organizing some finances myself, I was able to afford to go. And it was a great experience. I got to learn Japanese in Japan and actually use it like on a daily basis, which was it helped the problem that you have in the United States where you're learning Japanese, but you never have a chance to use it because no one else fucking speaks Japanese.
Yeah, the common problem of trying to learn any foreign language while being based strictly in the U.S.
Right. So I got to do that, and I also got to learn about other things in Japanese. Luckily, they were very simple subjects most of the time, and a lot of the professors there would give like summaries in English, which was definitely helpful. But at the same time, it was kind of boring because either the English explanations were so simple it was almost common sense, or all the Japanese was too complicated and the words were so complicated that like you wouldn't come across as even studying it for years. Like one of the lectures was about it was about like different countries' problems, and so words like birth rate, gun violence, theft, robbery, political. It's like political. The English, like I didn't know the word in Japanese, but when they summarized it in English, it was like political attacks or something like that, which I can only assume was meant as like a, intentionally targeting political leaders. I had really no clue because
too complicated.
Their summary only tells me so much, and I didn't know the words in Japanese because who the fuck knows the word political dissident in Japanese unless you work in an office where that's important.
Yeah. The way that you describe that, I think, is really funny because it's like because people are always like they'll like people who took a Japanese class with me in high school. There was like little animes that we would watch, and they'd be like, I know that word because it's a pretty simple word, and you're just like gun violence. It's like, okay, you're never.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what it was. I'd be listening to these lectures, and I'd recommend like grammar, maybe like I'd hear some grammar forms. I'd be like, oh, I know the like skeleton of this sentence, but I have no clue what it's actually saying. And then they give the English explanation, and I would like kind of I'd be like, okay, so that word he said means this, and that word probably means this, but I don't remember any of it because there's too much at once. There's just a flood of words that I'm never going to use again.
Right, yeah. And so would I be safe in assuming that the Japanese professors who would try and teach you things in Japanese and then give you a summary of the same things in English, were those people fluent enough in English that they could actually use the English words to describe what they're trying to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't specific, but it was definitely a proper summary. I remember this one class, it was almost completely focused on the birth rate in Japan being too low and talking about which cities have the highest birth rates, what measures or policies they put into place to help raise those birth rates, um, stuff like that. But I mean, they did good summaries, but there's not enough time in a class because keep in mind, for those classes, those specific ones where it was Japanese and then an English summary, those were real classes, like with Japanese students in them.
Yeah.
It wasn't something where it was just us exchange students. There were actual Japanese students in there. I
Yeah,
had other classes that were just the exchange students from Korea, China, United States, and I think there was one person from Vietnam, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Hmm.
But those classes were taught in only Japanese, but the words that were used were very simple. Like it wasn't, political dissident. It was it was like write about your favorite things, and that was too easy. I don't.
Yeah, like that's almost on
Oh
par
my!
with stuff that I was learning in high school Japanese classes.
I wasn't. I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but when we got there, they like pulled us aside for like a Japanese proficiency test, and when I tell you that was the biggest fucking joke of a test I've ever had in my life, like it was like first year stuff. The words were all super simple. The sentence structures were like first semester, maybe second semester stuff. There were very few complicated sentence structures, if any, and the questions they asked, because it was a reading, and then after the reading they asked you questions, and they had you read it aloud, so they could tell that you could read basic hiragana and some of the like level 1 kanji. So they have
They're
you
trying to
read it
weed out all the
aloud.
people who got there by accident. They're like,
They
something
ask you
doesn't seem right
questions
here.
about they ask you questions about your comprehension, and the questions don't even require you to know the sentence structure. They would be questions like, who was the main character in the story? And it's like, okay, I don't need to know what that sentence says to know that's a name.
Yeah.
And just that's it. Whose house were they visiting? Okay, well, if I assume the first character is the main character, I can assume the second name is the next character. Like
Whose
the
house they went
person.
to.
Yeah, and the whole thing was like that. And then they didn't tell me that they were done asking questions about the reading. They just asked me, like, I was supposed to just answer a question about my own life, but they didn't say, like, okay, we're going away from the reading now. They just asked it immediately after the last reading question. So they looked at me like I was a psychopath. Because they asked something like, how is your mother doing? Or, I mean, it's Japanese,
How's
so
your
it
family
doesn't really say
situation at home?
your mother. It just says, like, you've taken Japanese, so they don't really use a lot of specifics. It's a lot of context. So they didn't say
Yeah.
your mother. They just said like mother is how. Okasan wa
Essentially.
do desu ka? And I was like, and I literally said, I was like, in the reading there was no mention of a mother, so I couldn't tell you how their mother was. And then they looked at me like, what the fuck?
They're like, this fucking idiot.
And they like shook their head, and then they were like, no more reading, and I was like, oh.
My bad, pimp.
Like they didn't tell. Why did they tell me that first? Like there wasn't even a break. It wasn't even like they paused. They were literally like, question done, question done, question done. All right, now we're like moving on to the next set of questions. But it acted like another question. I was like,
Yeah,
what the fuck
question
is
done,
happening?
question done, question done. By the way, how is your mother? Huh?
Huh? There was no mother mentioned.
There was no mother in this story. Unless you want me to assume that that his mother is not doing okay because she's not in the story. I don't know what you want from me.
The thing was is that they were supposed to split up our group because our group had 300 level, 400 level, and 200, 300, and 400 level students, and those are completely different like amounts of Japanese knowledge. But that test only covered 100 level stuff, and yet they still split us all up for no reason because that test, everyone in that room got it like right. They understood what was being said. They answered the questions correctly, and they still split us up. And I
Yeah,
talked
that's
to the
weird.
students from the 200 level class, and they were like, "Yeah, they talked to us like we were babies the whole time."
I
And
feel
I was
like the
like,
way that you could
"Damn."
equivalate it is like they talked to you the way that that certain demographics of white people think that somebody who doesn't look white doesn't understand English and will talk to them very, very slowly.
Yeah, yeah, that was basically it. But it was just it was so funny that they even gave us that test because it was like the easiest test I've ever taken in Japanese. Like even my first year tests were probably more complicated than that.
It's a little bit embarrassing, but you know.
And they made us do this one at a time. They take everything in serious in Japan. So this like itty bitty little test for 14 international students that were in another room playing like heads up 7 up type games, but like Japanese games that are similar to that. And then you go into the room and they're like you sit down and there's like 3 people there. They're watching you like all
How is your
stanced
mother?
up, and you're like, oh man, this is terrifying. This test is going to be hard. And you look down and it's like, oh.
Oh, okay. It's literally like you walk in and you're like, this is gonna be an intense ass test, and then you realize that it's just like the questions that your teacher would ask you when you first walk into the class for in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Literally. Like, yeah, how's your mom? What's your favorite food? Where do you live? That was like the questions they asked. So I'm like, I've had to write about those questions since first year. I
You're like, I've been doing this shit for how long?
3 years.
3 years. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So
Like I was expecting them to ask me kind of like harder questions, like, do you have any recommendations from your hometown? Using some like spicier words and some like other grammar. No,
nope.
no.
How is your mom?
How is your mom? What's your favorite food? Where do you live?
That is so weird. I don't. My immediate my guess is that they were just not properly like told what you guys were getting yourselves into.
Everyone in Japan assumes that if you can say even the most basic of sentences, they're like, "Oh my god, you're so good at Japanese," and it's like,
I
no,
don't believe that to be true. Like, thank you for being
no,
so kind, but no.
literally,
But,
that's insane.
so you were all right. So we've established that you were going there to actually learn Japanese, especially in like a more authentic environment where you get to. Well, I guess the classes themselves aren't necessarily the most indicative of like real world applications of your language studies that you would use.
Yeah, it was going out and about and doing like fun activities outside of those classes where I got the most real experience.
Yeah. So what were the formal classes where you were doing stuff within essentially a campus? Were those just meant as another form, an alternative version of the learnings you were already doing in college here in the US, or like what?
They were meant as a cultural thing because the classes were done was that I took 6 credit hours worth of summer classes. 3 of them was my professor from my university teaching Japanese. The other 3 were credits from the other university, and those were culture credits. Those were Japanese culture credits. So the point of those classes was not necessarily to teach me Japanese, but more to give me an idea of what like a Japanese university environment is like, what university students are doing. Other classes, the ones that we did with like other foreign exchange students were more like minor cultural things, like neat places and like presentations on neat places in Japan, and like games that Japanese students would play when they were in school, and like origami, calligraphy, just like Japanese arts, and like just introducing us to these little bits of culture that, as learning Japanese, you don't necessarily experience, and let alone experience properly. Like
Hmm.
calligraphy is like the ink they use is super special. The brushes are all like a specific, like they're designed a specific way to allow you to press and get deep marks and then lighten up and get these like nice long smooth transitions. And then the way you hold the brush is super specific. We even created our own, like in Japan, they, instead of like signing things, they love stamps. Like one thing I've heard is annoying in Japan is that if you live there, um, instead of using a pen to like sign your name, you can't do that. You have to remember to bring your stamp, your like name stamp, and you stamp paperwork. And so they actually
You're
had
like,
us
I'm sorry,
create our own
sir.
stamp.
You're like, I'm sorry, sir. The stamp was not allowed through international customs borders.
Yeah, I mean, I just used a. I'm the way they had us make a stamp was basically just like a piece of cardboard with a tiny like maybe an inch by inch piece of cardboard with like a piece of styrofoam on it, and then we had to carve like our Japanese initial into it. So for me, I did the katakana da for Dakota, and then you put it in this like really weird. The stuff they use for that stamp is like it's almost like a wet clay in a sense, and it's bright red. I actually have, obviously the viewers won't see it, but I can show you what that stamp looks like on paper because I actually have that piece of calligraphy right next to me.
Oh yeah, that'd be helpful. I imagine it's probably some because like I'm thinking of like other stamps that exist where it's like a weird
So
oil stamp of sorts.
this stamp right there,
Oh.
yeah.
Okay.
So that stuff is like a very like clay waxy type stamping stuff. It's not like ink. It's not ink at all.
Yeah, it's like there's like a specific stamp that I think is used for like isn't it like the stamp that you would use to seal a letter? Like that kind of material?
No, it's
Like
not wax either. It's
huh.
like clay. I'm telling you, it's like wet clay. Like if you take normal clay or Play-Doh, no, not Play-Doh. Play-Doh's the wrong consistency.
Yeah.
Clay, and you put in a bag with a little bit of extra water, and you kind of gush it in, and you get like that gooey stuff that sticks to your hand, and it's like wet, and
Oh, okay.
it's
No,
like
that makes
that.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's
that's what the other three credits is for. Is like learning these Japanese, how Japanese people think, how Japanese people go about doing things. And the class I took was the like actual Japanese class that had Japanese students in it was called Human Geography, and it was
oh, yeah.
mainly about different problems of different countries. With obviously in Japan is going to have an emphasis on Japan.
Well,
But
yeah.
another thing, I actually did learn something new about the United States there. The United States has the highest variation for life expectancy of any country, as well of any first world country, as well as the lowest average of like any first world country for life expectancy. Shout out to my home state, Colorado, for having the highest life expectancy in the entire United States.
Yeah, having the
It's like
highest of
80
the
something,
lowest.
and I
Because
think
because
I think it was
isn't the average
Mississippi
like
had the lowest,
yeah, that's what you were telling me. But isn't the
and
average
also
like 78?
no, and not in America. No, no,
What?
it's like 69, I think. Funny number, but
Hmm. Maybe the information that I'm pulling from the internet is incorrect because the information I'm pulling is 77, and that's as of 2020.
77. Mm-hmm. Well, what
Honestly, I
is
think it would be a lot cooler
Colorado's?
if it was 69.
I could have sworn it was lower than that, but
Maybe.
although I might be thinking of out of Mississippi, which has like the lowest expectancy.
Yeah, let's see if I can find Mississippi specifically.
It's, I
I
mean,
mean, Mississippi's life expectancy
fun fact
is
about
still
correlation.
74.
Mississippi has the highest poverty rate of any state as well. So
Shouts out to all my Mississippi homies. Y'all are getting real screwed over by something. I don't know. But no, I ultimately I can I mean more than vaguely understand kind of what the whole purpose of that class is, because I imagine it also is helpful to just understand, because a lot of us understand what origami is, a lot of us understand what calligraphy is, but I think if you're learning it from a person who actually experiences it in its most culturally quote unquote pure way, which isn't really,
Mhm.
it's kind of an offensive statement to say, but like somebody who experiences it from the perspective of the country that is popular or popularized the damn thing,
Yeah.
you get to understand more context behind what it is. You get to learn more about it than just learning about it in an English class talking about Japanese culture or whatever.
Right.
Like if it's like a little subsect, and you also get to understand more context behind people, and it probably helps you understand the context behind the language that is used to describe the acts of doing calligraphy or origami or something, or whatever
I
you were
mean,
learning about.
the point of calligraphy, like all kanji are supposed to be like, for lack of better comparison, like Egyptian hieroglyphs, they're supposed to be images. They're supposed to be recognizable as things, real
Yeah,
things. Unlike words, which are meant to represent a thing, these are supposed to be images of the things. You know, a tree looks, I mean, obviously doesn't look exactly like a tree because that'd be
looks
too
like the
much,
skeleton of
but
a tree.
you can see, yeah, you can see why that's tree or why that's forest. Forest is literally three trees
Yeah.
next to each other. Like, makes sense. A forest is a bunch of trees.
Yeah, and I'm like the
So,
kanji for fire is probably the most, like the
oh yeah,
most easily executable
it
one that I
looks
can
like a
think of.
flame.
Yeah.
It literally just looks like a flame with like little flecks of fire coming off the sides. It's super cool. And I think doing the calligraphy and seeing it as like seeing those as an actual art, seeing each kanji as art helps that basically burn that recognition into you of like this isn't a word per se, this is like a picture and the picture represents a word.
Yeah.
The picture represents an object, a thing, an emotion, a feeling, whatever, you know, an action, but it represents it. So it makes it a lot easier because one of the hardest disconnects I have is that it's really hard to recognize kanji because I'm trying to think of it like a word, but it's not necessarily a word, it's a picture. And the best way to read kanji is to look at it like it's a picture, not to look at it like it's a bunch of letters, because that doesn't work. You get confused, you'll mistake it for something else, you will not understand it. Like, you'll understand what it means, but you won't understand what it means. You'll know the word associated with it, but you won't know the connotation and the background behind it, which is very, very important, especially in Japanese society where words that mean the same thing have different connotations and different meanings.
Yeah, it literally is like you take the kanji for one character, and if you combine it with another one, it basically nullifies what that word actually is and turns it into a different word dependent
Yeah,
on the other kanji characters that are around it. Like
I think I
this
think
this
another
is
good.
this is one that my Japanese teacher told us about a lot, where she said that the kanji that basically is supposed to represent God is also the same as carrot or something. Something equivalent to that. I don't know if carrot's the right word, but that was what she would tell us.
They're probably
Or maybe
similar.
it
They're
was,
definitely not the same kanji, but they can definitely be similar.
yeah. Um, and then there's all these like sketch comedy things that I'll see from people who I don't even know if they speak Japanese, but they'll be like, the kanji for this means husband, and the kanji for this means like imbecile or something, and they like look similar. I'm like, what?
Well, yeah, like the kanji for noisy is the kanji for woman three times.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was yeah.
Like, yeah, that happens all the time,
Yeah.
and it does change the meaning completely. Um, I think another good explanation of that is like word choice in an English sentence. Like, say someone sends you something and you respond with just the letter K. That's like a I don't want to say a threat, but it's like
It's like
you're
offensive a
like,
little
oh
bit.
no, oh no, they're mad.
Yeah, the
Versus
person I'm receiving it
okay,
is like, what did I do
technically
wrong?
they mean the same thing, but they have completely different connotations.
Yeah,
It's
and
the same
that's
thing in
obviously,
Japanese.
yeah, like cultural differences abound. It's all dependent on the context under which the person talking to you is using the characters.
Another one, the word kami. What does that mean? You should know what kami means.
Does it mean wolf? Or no, 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 no.
Nope.
Um, I don't know it off the top of my head because I
Time's up.
have forgotten.
Sorry. It means hair, but it also means God, and it also means paper.
Well,
And you want to know the difference between those three words? A, they're kanji, so when you're reading it, you can tell the difference easily.
well, yeah.
However, in spoken language, it's all about intonation. I don't remember which of which, but one is kami, one is kami, and the other one is kami.
I feel like the monotone one would be paper.
Don't
Again,
know.
I don't
remember.
expect you to know because you just said, but that's what my immediate guess would be. But
There's also kiru, and there's also there's kiru and kiru, and kiru, I believe, is to cut, and kiru
yeah,
is to wear.
that would piss me off because I'm a person who my inflection changes all the time when I'm saying the same word multiple times, and I do mean them to be the same thing. So that would make me very upset.
I mean, as a foreigner, you obviously Japanese people, they're not dumb. Just because you say the intonation wrong doesn't mean they're going to be like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
I have no clue what you're saying."
Because they'll
Like,
listen to the
they know what
context
you
around the
mean.
whole sentence.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
they're not dumb. And plus, I learned a fun fact. Okay, fun fact. I was in Kagawa Prefecture, Takamatsu City, which is kind of like countryside, and they have a country accent, much like America has a country accent. And a lot of the words' intonation flips.
Oh, just
So
the
even
opposite
in
of its
Japan,
intended
the
use.
intonation is reversed. You know,
Huh.
in that area, it's like flipped. A lot of the words that would go up would go down, and a lot of the words that go down go up. And I noticed it was actually kind of shocking because when I went there, I thought I had a pretty decent accent. I thought I was pretty good at making like having a Japanese accent to be understandable. But when I went to Kagawa, almost no one there could understand me. When I tried to order, they seemed confused or it took them a second to process. But when I went to Tokyo, I was able to talk way more. People seemed to understand me better. And I thought it was like just because I had more experience talking in Japanese since I'd gotten there. But it was, upon talking to my professor about it, it was because the style of Japanese that we were learning was Tokyo dialect, which is the most commonly spoken dialect in Japan. And
Duh,
the
yeah.
area we happened to have stayed in for study abroad uses that country dialect. So they were trying to listen to my Tokyo dialect, but also mixed with my American accent, which made things almost
They're like, this is very hard to follow. They're like, I don't understand.
Yeah, but when I was at the airport, I was talking to this to one of the workers there, and he was like, your accent is like amazing. Like I can understand you clearly, and most of the time when I talk to Americans here in Japanese, I can't understand them." And I was like, "I'm doing good."
Yes. Write it down in your notebook, a little list of wins.
Another part of the cultural part of my classes is that one of the professors I was with actually led us on, one of the Japanese professors led us on like field trips to shrines and cultural areas, and he would tell us the stories associated with these places and these murals and this artwork. It was really cool, actually. Just
Yeah.
for an example, I don't remember the person's name because I suck with names, but there's this one Japanese samurai who was known for his skill with a bow, and the enemy knew this as well. So the enemy held up a fan on a pole, and under the pretense that he had to shoot through the fan, and if he missed, he would have to kill himself on the spot. Like, yeah,
Why?
yeah, he'd have to commit seppuku because he bragged about his skill with a bow, and he was like the best bowman in Japan. And so if he missed, he would be like forsaking all of that hype, his own, you know, assertion that he's the best. He would be breaking that, and he hit it. And in that same fight, there was this general, and the general was kind of sucked at fighting, but he was this strategist. He wasn't there for fighting, but his sword got or he got disarmed, And once again, under threat of having to kill himself if he doesn't return home with his family sword, this motherfucker dives into the water because this battle was like on a waterfront.
On a coast. Oh, waterfront.
Yeah, where the dude who shot the bow was on horseback and the people holding the fan were on a boat. The other dude's sword got thrown into the water, and homie literally like jumps over a bunch of men who are coming and raiding them to go dive underwater and find his sword so he doesn't forsake his family. This is the same battle.
Jesus.
And it's all on this one stone mural that's like in the middle of the shrine we visited, and it was super cool to hear about it.
That's badass. The more balls than any American soldier I've ever seen. Fuck it. Dolphin dive over your opponents. Get your sword.
Hey, that's
and
their
do
honor,
whatever
man.
you had to do with it.
You lose your honor, you lose your life.
Yeah,
plain and simple.
No, that makes sense. Let me look here. You've obviously incidentally answered a couple of these questions just by accident, which is perfect because it just flows better. What were some of like the biggest cultural differences that you noticed upon touchdown? And kind
oh my god, that's a great question.
Like just throughout the trip, I suppose.
Number one of the first things I noticed is in Japan, their crime rate is very low. So kidnapping is like pretty much unheard of. Like it just does not happen for the most part. The number one crime committed there is sexual harassment on trains. Like that is their number one crime, and even that doesn't happen that often. So because of that, like no kidnapping, no like child related crimes for the most part, people will just let their kids walk around. In America, you see a kid on their own, you're like, oh shit, where's their parent? And you're like looking around frantically, and you're like, wait, you might wave your hand to try to catch the parent's attention if they can't see their kid. But in Japan, there's fucking 4 or 5 year olds just walking alone through the mall. When I would walk home from school and I would see groups of kids, like elementary schoolers, walking through downtown of a massive city. Like, just walking downtown alone. No adult supervision. Just groups of kids walking home.
Just hanging?
Yeah, and these are like 6-year-olds. And in America, you see a 6-year-old on the street alone, you're like, oh, where the fuck is your parent? Like, holy shit, they're irresponsible. How can they lose you? In Japan, that's fucking normal. Kids just walk home alone. They walk alone everywhere. And there's like no risk of them getting kidnapped. Or like almost none. Obviously stuff like that happens. But because their crime rate is so low.
Clearly low enough that it's a pretty common sight to not see, to just see them walking around just having a good time.
It took me quite a while to get used to it when I'd be out and about and I just see kids alone, like I'd be like, holy shit. And the reverse of that happened when I got back to America and I went to the Renaissance Festival and there was this kid walking alone and my first instinct was like, oh, kid walking alone, this is normal. And then I went, wait a fucking second.
I'm in the wrong country for that.
This is America. We are at a fucking Renaissance Festival with greasy, God knows whoever. And I started looking around. I was like, where the fuck is this kid's parent? This is in Japan. Oh, shit.
This is a red alert.
That was one of the biggest. Another thing, the amount of paper. Holy shit, the amount of paper they use. Oh my god. They use so much paper and like plastic for everything. Like when I was there, everyone's handing you business cards. Business card, business card, business card, business card. They're just walking around and you have to treat that shit like it's gold, by the way. Like it is disrespectful to like stuff it in your pocket. You take that bitch with 2 hands, even though it's literally just a normal sized business card. 2 hands. You take that shit and you put it in like the safest spot you can. If you're a Japanese person, you have a wallet specifically for business cards. And it only has business cards in it, and you put it in there. If you're like a foreigner, you put it in like a safe place in your bag. You put it in an empty slot in your wallet. Like, that's how you stay respectful. But moving away from that, when I was in the university, instead of like having PowerPoint slides like a lot of American schools do, he handed a 39-page packet to every student there. Keeping in mind that we spent less than 5 minutes per page. And we skipped some pages too. 39 pages per person in a like lecture hall.
A lecture hall.
No PowerPoint slides, just paper. I got a gift from the oh my god, another this is kind of culture shock, but we'll go over that later. But I ended up visiting the I think it was the mayor that gave me this gift. I don't remember specifically who gave me what gift. I think it was the mayor. And the gift came in a bag, a paper bag. You open it's in a paper sleeve. You take the
Right.
paper sleeve off. It's wrapped in paper. You take the paper off. It's in a cardboard box. You open the cardboard box, and inside every single fucking it was like red bean paste, like pastries.
Yeah.
Every single one was individually wrapped. So you have plastic wrapper inside a cardboard box, inside a paper wrapper, inside a paper sleeve, inside a paper bag. And that's how every single fucking gift I got was wrapped. That's how it always is. It's just paper and paper and paper and paper and paper.
That's like the
There's
Japanese
no receipt
equivalent.
option. There's no receipt. You get a fucking receipt. You can
And
throw it away on the spot, but
and it's
you're
on
getting a
paper.
fucking receipt.
That is the Japanese equivalent of just like the guy who's cutting the pizza and the guy duetting him on TikTok, and he's like, "All right, yeah, all right, that's good. That's enough. It's enough slices. Like, it's enough paper.
It's everywhere. Like people are handing you paper. You're getting pamphlets and packets and business cards. It's just paper and more paper. And from what I've heard, I didn't experience this part, but from what I heard, oh wait, yes I did. Fucking when I was filling out my paperwork to go to Japan, they wanted us to send like PDFs of these papers that we had to do. So we could just like type them out. But they also wanted a hard copy sent to them. They couldn't print it themselves. No, we had to send it to them. So that means I had to send them a PDF of my vaccination card and my passport. But I also had to then photocopy it and give it to my teacher, who had to physically mail it to them for no fucking reason.
Because they like their paper.
Culture shock number 3. For some reason, foreign exchange students are like they are like popular. Like we were on the news.
Damn.
Like we visited government offices. We visited the dean of the school. We visited let me go in order of like hierarchy first. Okay, so we visited the department head. We visited the department dean. We visited the mayor of the city, and then we visited I guess the best way to call it is the governor of the prefecture. Then we visited a school, and we were put on the fucking news. Like they're just hyped, and like you gotta meet everyone. And these meetings, they're like, I hated them, by the way. They're terrible.
They
It's
suck.
like,
But
it's like because you're just meeting this formal dude, you know. You're meeting this like this advanced position office, and you're just a college student visiting, and this person probably doesn't speak the greatest English. I think only one of them actually spoke English. Everyone else had translators. So you go in there, you had to do these like introductions, and you had to be like super formal every single fucking time. And then you go through, they give you like this big welcome speech, and then you have to give a welcome speech back, and then it's just it was just such a fucking pain in the ass every time, to be honest. And one time, on the spot, they were like, oh, we need a picture and someone to like give a speech, or not a speech, but like just a sentence or two recognizing the gift. And then my teacher just looks at me, and I'm like,
you fucker.
what the fuck?
Why?
So somewhere on the Japanese like newspaper somewhere, there's a picture of me holding the gift, like terrified out of my mind, because like no warning, no preparation. Everyone else who had to do that got told they were doing it. Not me.
Nope.
I didn't get that.
Fuck you.
I just had to go. And so that shit was And also, and they were like, oh, these aren't very formal, but they have like exact time slots. Like they're like, okay, the first 2 minutes is the intro speech from the governor, and the next 2 minutes is the intro speech from the students. Then the next 3 minutes are every student individually introducing themselves, and then it's 10 minutes of questions for the students, and then it's 10 minutes of questions for the governor, and then they're like, it's free time, and free time just meant like more questions, and you still couldn't breathe because you still had to be like professional and formal, and that was for every fucking meeting.
Jesus Christ. Okay. Um,
And then my professor, and they like that. Like Japanese people enjoy those things because my the professor there who was helping us get all of this, like got us into the school we got into, got us a whole bunch of discounts and deals. That professor was asking my professor when they send their kids here if she could get like a meeting with the mayor of the city and get them a meeting with the governor of the state. And she's like, there's no way in
it
fucking
does not work like
hell
that.
I might be able to get you a meeting with the dean of the department, but even that's not likely. That was a culture shock. I hated it. It was like, it was, oh god. But they liked me because I asked really good questions. Like I asked the mayor and the governor individually what they were like both, what was like the most proud moment of their career, like when, like what measures did they take that really made them proud. And the mayor said that expanding the city to cover more of the smaller towns nearby, um, was his like proud point because it took a lot of organization to make sure that those people's lives didn't get impacted so that they could just live their normal lives without really even knowing of the merge. Like make sure the policies and stuff were smoothly transitioned and all of that. So it took a lot of time and effort. And then the governor said that, oh god, what did the governor say? That one I don't remember as well because he said it all in Japanese, and the translator was even looking up words.
This motherfucker didn't know shit.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember. And I also asked like what was the biggest issue, and of course the biggest issue from every government office in Japan is the birth rate.
Yeah.
Every single one, it's the birth rate. That's always the problem. It's Japan has the lowest birth rate of any first world country. Their population is rapidly like becoming mostly old people. So they're running out of workforce.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's a thing that like a lot of people who are slightly more invested into Japanese culture would know, maybe.
Mm-hmm. One more culture shock: hierarchy. Insane. I was in a noodle restaurant. It was why can't I think of the name of the? It was an udon restaurant, and I was there, and there was this old man who was like, it. Japan doesn't really have a lot of cuss words, but the equivalent of cussing out his mother-in-law, and like this was like this frail old lady who couldn't even speak, and she was just trying to enjoy her udon, and this dude was like saying she shouldn't even be here, this is a waste of my money. This udon shop was cheap as hell, by the way, and this dude was in a nice ass suit. Waste of time, waste of money, she shouldn't be here, she's worthless, da 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 da. And loud, he was screaming. This was a tiny restaurant, like tiny. They had like a bar area kind of where you could like eat alone, and they had like four tables of like fitting four people each. Tiny little place. And he's sitting here yelling and screaming at this old lady, at his wife, and his wife isn't like really protesting but trying to defend her, and no one around is like telling him to shut the fuck up or like to stop being an asshole and making a scene. And that's just because in Japan, that dude was like the oldest dude, the oldest male in the room. Therefore, he had superiority over like everyone.
Oh, that's where you were going with that. Okay.
Yeah, no one questioned him. No one stopped him. Even the manager and like the cooks, no one interrupted because just like as a society, A, you don't want to make a bigger scene, and B, you don't critique someone who is older than you and like more wise than you. But this dude was just being a fucking dick. Like I was eating with two other people, and I'm not the best at Japanese, but even I could pick up some of those sentences. And the ones I didn't get, the person who was with us, who's the best at Japanese, was like translating it directly for us. All this terrible shit that he was saying to her, and his I don't know if it was, I think it was his wife, but his wife was like also kind of frail, and he looked mostly healthy, and he forced his wife to push the grandmother out, like with the wheelchair and everything, even though she looked like she could barely fucking walk. Yeah, yeah.
What the fuck?
Dude was a grade A asshole, and no one fucking stopped him. And I wasn't, as a foreigner, like, what the fuck was I gonna
What the
say?
fuck
I
was I
can
gonna
barely
be? I'm
speak.
not. I ain't
I can
gonna
barely
do
hold a
that.
conversation. If I spoke fluent Japanese, I might have, but I barely can hold like a conversation for the most part. I can answer simple questions. I can, kind of converse about like very small talky things like the weather and food, hobbies. Like that's about it though. I can't tell him, "Hey, dude, you're being a massive disrespectful asshole and you shouldn't treat people like that." I don't know how to say that in Japanese.
Just go look it up. Go ask the person who knows everything. You're like, all right, what do I say to this fuck?
Yeah. One more culture shock thing. Old people in Japan, they don't stop. Like retirement homes do not exist. You go
Yeah.
around and you see people who look like they can barely walk and they're going. They are chugging. I saw this old lady who looked like she was about to fall down a hill with the way her footing was and her walker. I was like, oh my fucking god, she's gonna die. She pushed through that shit. She looked like she was like 90 years old, hobbled. So many people in Japan are literally hobbled over, but they refuse to fucking stop. They will walk everywhere by them damn selves. So help them, God. If anyone tries to help them, they will throw a fit.
I mean, I've seen like videos of like really old Japanese men like hammering out what looks like it could be like mochi or some equivalent. Uh,
Retiring is like considered almost dishonorable in a sense. I met this one dude in this um, cafe, and he was this Japanese dude, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm super unusual for a Japanese person because I made a bunch of money from my job, and then once I felt like I had enough, I said, fuck it, I just want to go around, have fun, meet new people." So he literally just he he stays at hostels, and he just jumps from hostel to hostel to hostel around Japan to meet foreigners, new people, and talk to them. He cooked me dinner, which was really fucking nice. Talked to him for a while, but he's considered the weirdo, the exception in Japan, because he was like 60, decided to retire, and retiring, big no no, and then going hostel jumping to meet foreigners. Japan's a very xenophobic place. That's also
right.
a big no no.
But yeah, that last one is also something that I'm pretty sure you and me have even just talked about it a bunch just by accident. That like like their whole mindset on retirement is as a result of their work culture, and their work culture is also what's responsible for their declining population problem because
Hmm.
people are just too fucking busy to smash.
I mean, yeah, I talked to some Japanese students there. Even the students, like, even if they weren't working a part time job, they're like, yeah, in my free time, I like read a few pages of a book. And I'm like, that's it? They're like, that's all I have time for. And I'm like, what are you doing that's taking all of your time? You know, like when they're not going out with their friends on their during their free time and like going to karaoke or like going to get food or whatever, going to the mall. When they're not doing that stuff, they're doing like schoolwork or they're doing work from home or they're working on like projects and God knows what. They're always working. Like there's never I didn't hear like a single Japanese person who was like, yeah, I like to like spend my free time just chilling out watching movies,
Like they don't have that kind
watching
of
it
alone
like
time to
they
themselves.
watch anime and stuff like that, right? But a lot of times it felt like to me it was almost like a cultural thing where they wanted to make sure that they could talk about it with their friends. That's another thing they do. It's like they will have no interest in something, but if it means that they feel more connected and like not out of like to feel like a part of the group, they
Yeah.
will watch and do stuff that they don't even want to do just so that they can have something to talk about. Kind of like when your parent like looks up something you're interested in, even though they're not really interested, just so they can talk to you about it.
Yeah.
It's like that, but for everyone and for any person. That was thunder.
That was intense.
It's still
That's
thundering.
yeah, I can kind of hear it. That's kind of that's just so insane to hear about because like really I shouldn't be comparing anything we do here to anything that they do over there, except it is just an interesting thought exercise, I suppose. Like my friend group here, we're into a bunch of different things. I have a friend who's really into movies. I have a friend who's really into playing the bass. I have a friend who's a computer science major and he's building a website. I have somebody who traveled to South Korea for her study abroad stuff a few months ago. There's all the things that I get into. I have a friend who he is like trying to learn about like I don't know. He's trying to learn about like bikes. I have a friend who's really into going to the gym and all this other stuff. A lot of these things don't overlap and intersect like that, and yet we just kind of talk about the things that we're into because it's just another thing to bring to our friends, whether or not they know anything about it, and they can still have an interesting conversation about it. And we don't need to consume the media that they're consuming in order to make that happen.
It, yeah, that does not happen. Like in Japan, if you tell someone you don't know about their hobby, they take it almost personally. Like really personally. And if you tell them a hobby you have that they don't have, they will do anything to try to relate to it in some minor way. Like I could tell someone that, oh, I really like rock climbing, and they'll be like, well, I went on a hike once where we had to go over this tiny boulder. They will try so hard to find something to relate to you instead of just saying, oh, that's cool. I've never done that before. They don't like saying that, unless you meet the younger people and the people who are more open to foreigners, and those people tend to have way more open mindsets and way more of a, oh yeah, that's okay, I don't do that, but I can listen to you. But people who are just straight like very Japanese minded, that's not a thing, especially in the dating scene. In the dating scene, you don't
Oh
dare tell
boy.
someone that you don't know what they're talking about. You can actually see that in anime sometimes. And it's not like a dramatized thing. It's not like they're being dramatic when they show characters like struggling to relate to someone else's hobby. That happens. I've watched it happen when we would talk about, as Americans, when we talk about our interest, people would do that to us because a lot of us had completely different interests.
Yeah, which is pretty normal, obviously.
Yeah. And another thing that impacts the low birth rate, just FYI, is their dating culture in general, where it is considered odd to approach people you don't already know. Like, it's really weird making friends there because unless they are one of those more open minded, kind of more quirky Japanese people, most people will not glance at you. They will not invite you to their table. Like, you can walk up and talk to them, and they will keep it brief. They will not. They're not disrespectful. Never disrespectful. But they will keep it brief, and they will try to hint at you as much as physically possible to get the fuck out. We don't want you here. And the same thing in the dating culture. Like, you in America, you can kind of walk up. Say you're at a, I don't know, club, and you see someone dancing alone. You can walk up and introduce yourself, and as long as you're not a fucking creep, they're probably not going to tell you to go fuck yourself. But in Japan, doing that, you are kind of a freak, even if you have the best intentions and you just want to get to know someone or meet someone new. You're a creep. You're a weirdo. You don't do that.
Yeah, so I guess it's like I would equate that to like people who struggle to find friends outside of the context of work or school.
Yes.
So it's kind of like the only reason that you would be talking to these people is because you were forced to do some kind of group project with them. That's the only time you're going to talk to them, and unless you form some kind of good relationship with them during that time, you wouldn't have a reason to go up and approach them. So you take that, you kind of apply the same logic to a work related space, and maybe if you find people at like a public space entertaining a similar hobby that you also partake in, maybe.
Yeah, basically that's as far as you get when it comes to the socialization aspect in Japan. like once again, there are exceptions, and a lot of times those people are the quirky people in Japan. Like one of the people who was very helpful and friendly towards us, um, her name was Kanon, and she was definitely very quirky. Her hair was green with purple tips because she really likes asparagus. And so she would make her hair every day into some version of braids. Could be two long ones, could be one braid. She had this one style where she would like the back of her. She had one part of her hair short and the other part long, so she could have a style where she would only have the long hair braided and she still have the short hair. But all of the braids were meant to look like asparagus because they tend to look kind of braided
Yeah.
when you're look. Yeah,
What
so
the
you have quirky
okay,
people like
okay.
that.
That's
Canon was
very
great.
bizarre. Yeah.
She was tons of fun, and she was very accepting and curious and wants to visit America and study abroad. But like those are the only kinds of people, those people who are already open to being unique, already open to not following the Japanese culture very as strongly. Those are the people who are more likely to reach out or actually do those things where they will seek out friendship and companionship. Like it's only those people, and those people are also the ones that typically do, talk to foreigners. So a lot of the people that foreigners meet are those more quirky Japanese people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess the thing that's kind of tripping me up is like obviously I imagine once again a part of it has to do with like a work culture thing of like they're fucking busy all the time, but I feel like humans are naturally social creatures. So like there should be like some intrinsic part of most people that says like I would like to make friends or at least be able to just talk with people if I feel like they might share a common something with me.
A lot of
But
Japanese people have the same friend group like all of their school years, and then they'll have the same friend group and they'll basically just have a work friend group. And if they still talk to those friend groups from high school, then obviously those they're still friends, but it's not nearly their circles are way more work related and a lot less friends related. And
hmm.
the thing about Japan is everyone's so close together. So even if you can't be antisocial in Japan because even the small country city I was in was densely populated.
Yeah.
You interact with people a lot. You will see them, hear them, be around them a lot. You can't be antisocial, but if you're too social, you're a weirdo. Like a lot of Japanese people, they don't open up to their friends like we do, They don't talk about their stresses and their burdens. They try to put on like a facade of like, oh yeah, everything's okay. It's fine. I'm working through my own stuff. They're not going to burden their friends with anything like that either. It's a lot of Japanese relationships aren't that deep. Like they are very surface level, and as a foreigner, even asking questions like "Where are you from?" can be considered too personal.
Hmm.
Like I remember because my professor had to tell us one time because we asked one of like the mayor or the governor, someone, we asked them like, "Oh, where are you from? Like, why are you the governor of this area, or have you lived in the city your whole life?" And like the person was clearly taken aback because that was like too personal question. Asking about people's families can also be really awkward. Like, oh, like what does your mom and dad do for a living? That can be considered a too personal question. That can be considered too much, especially if you've just met someone. Versus I feel like in America, you know, you meet someone and they're like, they talk about, oh, I like to work on cards, and you're like, oh, okay, like, did your dad work on cars? And they'll, and you can start a conversation from there. In Japan, you don't do that.
Yeah, do you work on cards? Fuck, you work on cars?
Aha, you
Yeah.
did it too.
Yeah,
Now
okay.
I'm not dumb alone.
You never were dumb alone. I think I was dumb before you, actually.
But
There's not like a big
that's
gap, but it certainly does exist. But
that's the sort of Japanese relationships that exist, like interpersonal relationships. I mean, when people get Japanese people like to get drunk together, karaoke is very common. Just eating, laughing, making jokes and such. And Japanese humor is completely different from American humor. Trust me. We made a joke about I think at one point we made um like a oh my god I'm gonna kill myself joke, and they were like, oh, what?
whoa.
Versus America, we say that shit all the time. Like,
Yeah,
man,
because that's how we cope with death, is
yeah.
by laughing at it. But
And in Japan, they
wow.
don't say stuff like that, but they do say similar to that. They'd say like shinu hodo ga ii, which means like I'd rather die,
Yeah.
and that's dramatic. Like that's a big dramatic statement.
Yeah, and
Like
we're
you're either
literally
saying that
just
to get a
tossing
rise
it
out of
around all the
people, or
time.
you're like, oh, or you're doing it as like a joke to be dramatic.
Yeah, like their sarcastic version of that.
Yeah, exactly. But like just casually saying that, like in a sentence, you wouldn't do that. Versus like how we'll be like, "Oh man, I'm gonna kill myself," you know. That sort of statement does not
Yeah,
fly.
because I also do understand that if you try to enunciate the phrase "I'm going to kill myself" in a Japanese forward-facing way,
We
it's
said it in
very
English.
oh well. If you say it in English, if they understand that, it sounds incredibly aggressive.
Yeah.
Like obviously not towards them, but it's just a very aggressive like way to say that.
Oh yeah.
Like there are certainly more dramatic and silly ways that we that we get the point of wanting to die across.
Yes.
But yeah, I imagine that's also probably a part of like obviously it's like not necessarily wanting to joke about death, but I think a part of it is just like how aggressive the sentence "I'm gonna kill myself" is.
Oh well, another thing is like in America we like if I call it like earlier I said, "Ha! Now I'm not the only one who's dumb." That stuff also doesn't fly.
Like
Like
self-deprecating type.
no, 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 no. Just like to them, our jokes are very aggressive towards each other. Like if I like in that sentence I told
Oh,
that like I'm not the only one who's dumb. That was me calling you dumb. That does not fly. They
yeah.
were like I was
Oh,
there was someone I was with there. One of the people who was with me was named Sabrina, and she and I, we were in the same class, like Japanese class, so we knew each other already. And we were joking around like, "You bitch, you fucking asshole, I'm gonna kick your ass." And they're like, "Oh
panicked.
my god!" And like there was one time when the Japanese foreign exchange students were visiting, like my school, and I went with another one of my friends and hung out with like these foreign exchange students. At one point, I said in Japanese to my friend because she was like rambling on. I said "urusai," which just means like you're being noisy. You know, it can be kind of translated to like "shut up," but you're really saying is you're being noisy.
Yeah,
Passive aggressive way of saying
you're
"be
being
quiet."
loud.
Yeah. So and they literally all we were with, I think it was three or four of the exchange students, and all of them turned their heads and looked at me. They were like, "Oh," because they don't say that kind of stuff as a joke. Like it's not a joke. The same way we'd go, "Oh, shut up." They don't
Yeah, I
do
see.
that.
Okay. So it's not
It
even
doesn't
it's not even
happen.
yeah, it's not even a matter of like cuz I know that like a lot of Japanese stuff is also like there's a difference between the formality of saying something versus the informality of saying something. In this case that's not even the issue. It's just like that is not a phrase that they say
In
in
a
a
joking
joking manner.
manner. Yeah, and like it's that person is my close friend. I can be informal with them, and even then, like Sabrina's was a closer friend of mine. I can be informal by Japanese own like speaking rules, but if I call her a dumb idiot, that's like they think I'm being serious
Yeah.
because our humor is so aggressive a lot of the times, and it's so like almost attacking each other in a sense that they take it as an attack and a threat.
Yeah. And even if there is a way to display a degree of like sarcasm within like the tone in which you speak, it's just not it's just they just don't say those kinds of things. So that's not something that they would be
Hmm.
accustomed to hearing as a joke.
Yeah, yeah. So Everyone
Damn.
I asked, I asked them, like, do you think American humor is too aggressive? And they said yes.
I'm like, oh, okay, I understand.
Like they don't make jokes against each other like that. They don't joking about each other. It can be considered too far. A lot of Japanese humor is very dry. It's
Yeah.
very dry humor, and it's either dry or it's flamboyant. But there's no there's not a ton of sarcasm. There's
Yeah.
some, but it's very specific, and they have a very specific way of doing it that I can't really mimic.
Yeah, and it's
So
more
when they,
sarcasm not applied to something that sounds like it's an insult if you took the
yes,
sarcasm out of it.
yeah, very much so. It's like I had a presentation that I had to give in Japanese to the bunch of the professors and students there, and I made a few dry jokes. And when I tell you that room was losing their fucking minds at jokes I thought were like so mild, like so tame, and like I got the whole classroom laughing 4 times.
I kind of love
And
that, honestly.
I was like, damn, I tried to make this presentation and like interesting and funny, but I didn't I definitely wasn't that funny.
But to them,
Yeah, but to them
that's
it
just
was.
that's funny.
They have very dry humor. So when I made jokes about like ramen portion sizes, and I put like crudely drawn arrows pointing to like American ramen versus Japanese ramen, and they saw that I put like funny little sentences in Japanese, like with those arrows, they
It's okay.
laughed.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I made a joke at the end that like I basically completely changed the topic, and I was like, in conclusion, I've decided I don't actually care for ramen that much. I really like udon because the area I was in is known for their udon. They're like famous for it.
Yeah.
And there were like 18 udon shops within like a half mile of my hotel. Like that's how
Jesus
popular it is.
Christ.
And so I ended it with that, knowing that they would be like, "Oh yeah, awesome. He likes udon. Wow, that's funny. He made a whole presentation on ramen and then ends it with liking udon." Fucking like burst into laughter, and I was like,
Yeah, okay.
what the fuck just happened?
Cool. Huh. That's very interesting. I'd love to. I don't know if there's a way to properly examine this kind of thing, but I'd be very interested to kind of look into some of these differences you've been talking about and just figuring out like what makes like what are the cultural differences that lead to this kind of thing happening. Like I don't know how you'd find that information, but I'd just be curious like what is it about Japanese culture where their jokes are like maybe it's not even about Japanese culture, maybe it's just us in America just being kind of weird. Like who knows?
If I had to put a guess on like jokes specifically, I'd say it's because they're such a community focused group of people that by targeting individuals and making them stand out by saying, "Oh, you're such an idiot," or "Oh, oh, what a bitch," stuff like that. By making them seem like they're not a part of the whole, it can be considered really offensive. And once again, like I said, they don't really get very personal. They tend to maintain very surface level relationships. I think that also goes into it because like the only reason that I can insult you on a level like that, call you a fucking idiot, is because I know you well enough, and I know you. I've heard your story. I know what you're from. I know what you're about. I know what your loves, hates, all of that is. That
Yeah.
I can call you that, and you know that I'm not serious because you know that I know you better than that. And I think that's
Yeah.
like a really big defining difference, is that the depth of the relationship really is how much you can dig at someone, because they know you're joking,
Because
you're
you've built the
joking.
connection with them and that's just
Yeah,
not a thing that happens over there.
but in Japan you don't have that. You don't have that level of understanding. So any insulting joke, any sarcasm at their expense is very insulting, because you don't know them like that. You don't know them well enough to make that sort of comment. You
Yeah,
don't know
and to
what their
them
experiences are.
they could assume that you actually think they are a bitch
Yeah,
or dumb or whatever.
yeah, exactly. I think that's something to do with it.
the community
Yeah, I
part
could
as
believe
well,
that.
making people stand out. That like that's always a no go. You don't want to make anyone stand out or feel like they're not a part of the community.
Yeah. There was actually some other portions in this that I was going to bring up, but then it just never happened about like people in Japan being able to tell that you stand out from the rest of them of the rest of like the natives just based on the way that you like walk and things. So it makes sense
Yeah.
that clearly being singled out amongst a group of, busy bees of people is kind of like an awkward situation and leads to or can lead to
So
not so
that
savory
brings
things for
another
them.
cultural difference and kind of culture shock to mind. Is that in America, if someone moves to America and they've really like they have a house, they live here, they work in America, they have family here, we would consider them an American, like pretty much no matter what country they come from, right? Like
Yeah.
take for instance J Ro. J Ro's parents are Korean. They came from Korea. He looks Korean. He understands Korean and can speak a little Korean. We consider J Ro an American because we do that. We just do. But in Japan, they would not, in a reverse instance, they would not consider him an American or a Japanese person. I was talking to people who work and live in Japan and have for years, and no one considers them an American, even though they're or not American. No one considers them Japanese, even though they are fluent in Japanese. They've lived in the culture for so long that they've gotten the hang of a lot of those cultural differences and those like little minute things. They work with Japanese people. Their friends are Japanese people, and yet they say that they still don't feel like the people there treat them like they are a part of the Japanese community. They, as they put it, in Japan, the Japanese people, no matter how long you've lived there, will always treat you like they're honored guest. Honored guests. They're very respectful. It's not like they're disrespectful towards you. It's not like they treat you like scum most of the time. Most of the time, they're very pleasant, very nice, but you will never be a part of that community. You will always be a guest, no matter like nicely treated guest, never rude, you know, never treated like trash, but always a guest, no matter how long you've lived there. If you don't look Japanese, like even if you're born in Japan and you look white, you will never be a
Oh,
Japanese. People will always assume that you are white and not Japanese. Even if you're fluent, even if you live there, even if both your parents taught you fluent Japanese and you don't know a word of English or whatever language of country you come from, your parents came from, you don't know a single word of it. You only know Japanese. You are not a Japanese person. You will never be considered a Japanese person. You will always be an outsider in their eyes. And that's
huh.
where the xenophobia kind of comes in a little bit more.
Yeah, it's not aggressive xenophobia, but it is still
No.
recognizing that it is a thing that they have, which is that
Yes.
they will denote whether or not you quote unquote belong there off of
Yep.
potentially surface level things,
Yep.
and they will treat you differently as a result, even if it doesn't inherently mean a bad thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And eventually it gets lonely, is what they were saying, is because if you never truly feel a part of their community, and Japan is such a community based society, you feel
What do you
isolated.
have? Yeah.
Yeah. You feel very isolated. Even if everyone's treating you respectfully and people are nice to you when you go out to eat at restaurants and on the street, and your coworkers are nice to you and talk to you like normal. But in the
You just
end,
don't feel that connection as if like
yeah,
you
you feel very isolated and lonely.
yeah. Huh. Very interesting. I wouldn't even yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know. It's just I guess that whole myth about it is very true. It's even more true than I had initially expected, where it's like it's not even just down to how you walk. It's like if you look a little bit not from there,
Yeah.
you will be treated like a foreigner
I mean, the
and
people I
whatever
was
comes
talking
with it.
to, they were translators, like, and good translators. They were like proficient in Japanese. They spoke it fluently, and yet, um, I mean, at work they felt more like your coworkers will treat you more as like a Japanese person because they have that constant experience of you talking like a Japanese person and going to work parties and that. But even they will treat they might eventually treat you like you're Japanese, but when everyone else around you doesn't, it's almost like they're being accidentally racist. The same way that, like, for example, if an old white like family saw someone who looked like they were from Mexico, and they just immediately assumed that they didn't speak English and only spoke Spanish, and talked to them like that was the case. That's kind of how you, as a foreigner in Japan, are always treated. I mean, there were times I were there, I would try to say something Japanese, and they literally wouldn't listen to me. They wouldn't even try to listen to me. They would ignore me or cut me off and like point at the menu or like divert me to something else, or like it doesn't, you never, even if you know what you're talking about, you still get fucking cut off or treated differently. That assumption is made by everyone, and it's not out of hostility. It's not out of malice or intentional, bigotry and racism. It's just how it is. That's just what happens there. There's such an isolated country that's if you're not from Japan, they immediately assume that you don't speak the language, which is kind of fair when 99% of the population is Japanese.
Yeah, and when probably a good majority of the foreigners that go there probably don't speak
Yeah,
Japanese, especially
exactly.
not to a level,
Of
especially not to a level
fluency.
where, yeah, exactly. Like, we've technically, you and me have taken Japanese for the same amount of time objectively. The obvious difference is that you have more recency of, knowledge and muscle memory to things that you can say, and you're also taking it at a higher level. But like, I could probably, well, no, never mind. I was about to shoot myself in the foot. I don't think I could go down there right now and feel comfortable walking around because I wouldn't know what the hell I'm doing. 3 years ago, if I suddenly miraculously had the ability to do that, I could maybe, just because of the freshness of the information in my mind. But they would have a very good reason to assume that I can't talk beyond the level of somebody who watches like anime on a consistent basis, I guess would be the best comparison. I couldn't even say of like a kindergartner, because kindergartners know more Japanese than I do.
Oh, the preschoolers I interacted with knew more Japanese than I did.
Yeah,
It's not even a
but
joke. I actually learned words from them. But
yeah, because
one thing I
they
will
have
say
to
about
learn a lot more
Japan
than
is,
us.
despite
But
all of that, all the things I just said about like isolation and like being treated differently, their accessibility as a foreigner is insane. Almost every sign is in 4 to 5 languages. Like,
yeah,
especially in Tokyo and like big cities, I mean, signs were in Japanese, English, Korean, Chinese, and in some places even French, because, fun fact, France is um, the biggest importer of manga in the world. And
that
like, French
yeah,
people
okay.
really like Japan for some reason. But
French is
that
weird.
means
France is weird. That's why.
it's super accessible as a foreigner. Like, even the buses had like recordings that would tell you the station like you were going to in English, and like, oh, this stop is this station, next stop is this station, in English and Japanese and Korean and Chinese.
Use all of them. So it's like the infrastructure is there to support foreigners, but just the way that the
The
people are
culture,
there
yeah.
is
And they
just
like tourists. Like, they're perfectly nice to tourists. It's just a matter of you are never, ever, 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 ever. You could live there for 30 years working at like the most famous company in Japan. You could work there for that long, speak fluent Japanese, live there, have a family there. You could have married a Japanese person.
and
Does
nope.
not fucking matter. You are not Japanese. You are not part of that community, and you never will be. You might be a part of that family. They might consider you like that. but you are not a part of the larger community. You are only part of the tiny communities that you have to like brute force your way into.
Yeah. Through just sheer force of like,
Force
I
of
am
will.
louder than you. I will talk and you will listen to me. At least to some
Basically.
extent.
Like, I will be a part of this family, this community, because I know how to speak Japanese. I know these cultural norms. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
only way.
Yeah. Well, I suppose from my perspective, that kind of sucks to hear. But coming from my perspective, I can at the very least say that I would never be there long enough to run into that issue. I'm gonna be there at some point, and I would be there for just long enough where I don't need them to try and even pretend like I am a part of their culture. Because look at me. I look like I have red facial hair. Like 67% of me is British. Passes out. Like I would never expect them to do that, but it is for people who do live there and people who have moved there, and like somebody like you could start off going there for 2 months to study abroad to learn more about the culture and learn more about their language and things, because you had already been doing it for 2.5 years, almost a full 3 prior to that.
No, I've been learning for 3 years prior.
Well, actually, yeah, sorry. You get the point. You could start off doing that, and then you just work your way into just kind of assimilating yourself there via cultural things. And no, just no.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit of a rough gambit to hear, but on a slightly more positive note, and because we're now running a little bit low on time, I want you to just rapid fire run me through a list of like your top 5, top 6, whatever favorite and least favorite things about the trip as a whole.
All right. So for let's the best things. There's a garden called Ritsurin Koen, which is just Ritsurin Garden, and that place was gorgeous. The history behind it is that a like feudal lord decided he wanted a personal little like garden of sorts for himself, and then he also was like told his servants, hey, I want Mount Fuji, but like in my front yard. So they built an artificial hill
Oh, that's
in it.
cute.
And then he also wanted a waterfall because he just thought it needed a waterfall, so he had his servants carry barrels of water up a cliff and then pour them down the cliff so that he could see the waterfall. And
Damn.
then they added like plumbing to it, so now it actually is a waterfall, like artificial waterfall, but same place where they had to dump water from.
Yeah.
That place was super cool. I got to visit a ton of shrines, all with various histories. I already mentioned the like big stone mural that had like that big battle on it. That was super cool to hear about. In Tokyo, they have like giant arcades just filled with all sorts of fucking games that you could play. I got to play like a Resident Evil shooter, but my favorite thing was definitely the there was like a drumming game, and it was like
Oh,
hooked
yeah.
up to a real electric drum set. So it wasn't
You were
like,
telling me
it
about
wasn't like
this.
a rock band kit where it's like these little piddly little drums. Like this was a full size electric drum kit that I got to use, and you're playing the game, and it's a really fun fucking rhythm game. That was a ton of fun. I got to go to a it's called Team Labs Planet, and it's like a fucking interactive art display that had just so much cool stuff in it. You start with this waterfall of light that like lights the entire hallway you're in, and you walk up like barefoot because it's water. You go up there, you go past that. Afterwards, they have towels so you can dry off your legs and your feet, and then you go into this room where the entire floor is basically made out of the beanbag material, and it was supposed to like make you feel, a lot of times since everything has been flattened for us, we don't really pay attention to our body. We kind of lose a sense of self and connection, and so it was like meant to force you to feel around and feel yourself and understand where your body is and how it's moving to get you through the room, which is cool. You go down, and then after that room, you go to a room that's like basically LED lights. It's a mirrored room on all sides, and there's LED lights dangling from the ceiling. And on the inside, it just looks like the lights are crazy and wild, and they're just changing, and it's hard to really tell what's happening. But there's a room on the outside, and if you watch in, all of the lights are forming these like 3D shapes and explosions, like supernovas and planets and like comets, and like almost like in Star Trek when they go like hyperspeed, and like all the light goes. There was one that was like that. It was super cool.
Nice.
And I sat there for like 45 minutes, and then you go to this koi pond, and it's like it's not a recording. It is being generated actively by a computer program, and it is like a light koi pond. So they like projected koi fish, and the koi fish naturally navigate to where people are. And when they hit you, they explode into flowers. And then once enough koi have popped, it turns into this like swirling rainbow in the pond. And you're up to your like knee in water. It's warm water, but it was super cool to like be in the pond with the fish and see them explode. You're barefoot the whole time. The floors have different textures to keep you like. It was meant to mess with all of your senses, and all of the hallways and the rooms are scented differently as well. So it's like all of your senses except taste are really being tested.
Put my tongue in the water.
The walls were all made of velvet, and the really cool thing is, you know how velvet is like stiff one way and like soft in the other?
Yeah.
If you were walking the correct direction and you had your hand on the wall, it would always be soft. So if you ever got lost, if you put your hand on the wall and it was rough, you knew you were walking the wrong direction.
That's genius.
Really cool. There was another room, and it was another constantly computer generated room, and it has a mirrored floor, and you're supposed to lay on the floor and look up in this dome that is supposed to be a projection of the universe with a flood of flowers. And so they're all the flowers. You can see them in the distance. You can see them coming right at you. It's super disorienting, and it was so cool. That room smells like flowers. And you literally you sit there, and then when you stand up, like I lost my balance. I was stumbling out of the room because it's like so disorienting. You really feel like you're in the middle of space, just staring off into the cosmos. And then you walk out of, that's like the last room. I didn't get to see one room that was like these balloons because there's a helium shortage in Japan. But the last room, there's one room that is like this moss room, and I didn't get to see it at a cool time because the moss room like glows at a certain time of day. But the last room was a room that had hanging orchids that would move up and down. They called it an orchid maze. It was not a maze. You just go into the room, you lie on the floor, and you just watch the flowers, and they come like within inches of your face, and you get to see the flowers and how they manage to grow even though they are upside down and moving constantly. The point was that orchids are like the strongest plant species, and they make up like 20% of all plant species. And they're found like all over the world in completely different environments. It was supposed to prove how durable they are. And you could also see where people had like picked and plucked at them, and where there were like brown spots. And in my mind, it was supposed to show that like even though this plant is so durable, it's so hardy, and it can live almost anywhere, humans, just by existing in an area, destroys nature even as hardy and long lasting as that plant. I thought it was a really cool message that it was displaying there. I went through the entire thing twice. First time I took pictures and like videos and all that stuff, and the second time I wanted to just experience it. I didn't want to be hiding behind my phone. I wanted to actually be watching and looking, and I'm so glad I did, because I missed out on a lot of things. Like the koi pond, I didn't realize the fish exploded when they hit you. In the light room, I didn't find the side room where you could see the shapes blooming and exploding. In the flower room, I didn't even sit there long enough to get truly lost. Or like the projected flower room, I didn't stay there long enough to get truly lost in the scene. So I really am grateful that I stayed twice for that. Also I got to go to it's called Monkey Mountain, and it was just you take a ferry, you go to this mountain, you take a bus up, and then you get to see monkeys. The monkeys were very
Nice.
hostile. And
Oh.
quick little fun story. There was a mama monkey that had a baby monkey on her, right? And then this asshole dude monkey, I don't know if he was like wanting to mate with her or what, but basically grabs the kid and just chucks the kid.
Yeet the child.
And then the mom obviously is livid, and all the other monkeys are livid, and they fucking chase this dude around, and he runs like on our feet and like in between our legs as a group. He put a hand on one of my friend's like legs, and he stepped on my foot.
Douche.
And they were like, "Stay! You have to stay 2 meters away from the monkeys." Fun fact: monkeys don't follow that rule. I had a monkey literally walk up to me and sit at my feet, and I was like, "What?" Yeah. Worst things in Japan: the amount of paper they use.
Yep.
The fucking hyper formality, and the fact that people on bikes, because you're a foreigner, they look at you and they like stare at you, and because naturally you go where you're looking, so you'd be walking and then everyone on their bikes looks like they're about to veer and hit you because they start veering and then they correct themselves and you're like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Little bastards.
2 fucking seconds. Another good thing about Japan: convenience stores. American gas stations / convenience stores that don't even compare to how convenient Japanese convenience stores are. Payment is super easy and it's done by like an automated teller. They have hot food, they have sandwiches, they have onigiri, they have medicine, they have ATMs, they have alcohol, they have fucking everything you could ever want. Really. So convenient, so awesome. Trying to think another thing that like pet peeved me in Japan, because I know I had a few things that really just that definitely irked me and were like minor. Oh my god, the paper straws are fucking ridiculous. Like it's like the paper straws they use in Japan feel worse than the ones we use here. Like they fall apart.
I didn't think that was possible.
Paper. You're drinking and you're like paper piece.
Suffocate.
Yes.
There's only one thing that I can think of that you told us about, but I'll save it for a second until you've exhausted all of your things.
I think I'm kind of out right now. So
right.
You can go for it.
Yeah, this obviously isn't Japan's fault, but like I know that you said that you wanted to go to the cat island and unfortunately your body would not let you. And I imagine that must have been incredibly frustrating.
Oh yeah. I mean, the thing about being in Japan that long is, you're gonna feel shitty some days. You're gonna feel homesick some days. And on that day in particular, like it's no secret that I've had depression and anxiety for most of my life. And even being in a place as cool as Japan, there's some days where it just hits,
Oh yeah.
You're there and you're like, oof, wow, I'm not feeling good today, and that happened to be one of them.
Yeah.
I got to go to a maid cafe that was actually pretty nice.
That's
it wasn't
fun.
nearly as degenerate as I thought it was going to be, which I was glad for because I went because they had a good like all you can drink deal, and I was like, fuck it, I'm in Japan, I might as well go to one. And it was actually pretty nice. It was a cool place. Had one maid really talk to us and like actually try to talk to us even though we were foreigners in both English and Japanese. And she actually let us talk in Japanese without interrupting or telling us like to stop.
Bozos.
Super nice. Another kind of pet peeve while I was in Tokyo. This is less a pet peeve and more of like what's it called? Just something I noticed is that the trains are so crowded, especially during like 5 o'clock.
Christ,
that the attendants will literally shove people. Like there would be so many people that the attendants have to physically push them into the train and like pack like sardines. And that happened to me when I was going from Kagawa to Tokyo. So I had my whole suitcase with me. And I ended up being like pinned, holding myself over the sleeping. There was like a sleeping girl sitting down. And I literally had to hold onto the bar with my bag like in between my legs to try not to crush this poor girl because of how crushed we were in that thing.
Damn.
Yeah.
There are many more bigger implications to that, but that must have just been incredibly awkward looking. It's like
She was asleep. She didn't even know that she was inches away from getting crushed.
Well, yeah, but never mind. Either way. But yeah, that is another thing that I've heard about is that that just happens, and unfortunately, it's just like that's kind of what you have to deal with, unless you happen to get on a train where there aren't that many people on it,
Mm-hmm.
or like I don't know, walk the whole way.
Yeah, no. I mean, the trains are so convenient. That's another thing I love about Japan. Public transportation is convenient. You can get anywhere and reasonable time. You can
Hell
anywhere
yeah.
reasonable time. Super convenient in English. Like all the ticket vendors have English options, and the trains make sense. Once you learn the system is the same everywhere in the country. You don't have to fucking learn a new system just because you're in a new city.
Yeah,
Super convenient.
very
Love
standardized and
public.
whatnot. So that's cool.
I
That's
also
nice.
when we're done, I have a funny little outro statement.
Like for after the recording.
No, for like just ending towards the end, just like my
Yeah.
final words.
I was like, you know my thing. You know what I do here.
Yeah, my final words. I know what my final words would be. So
Fair enough. I think we both have our own final words, so we'll figure that out. No, that's kind of that isn't technically everything, but we have been here for an hour and 40. It is past midnight, just so I can just totally just reveal my secrets to everybody, and I didn't get to ask everything. So these are questions that I'll probably just incidentally end up asking when I have more time to just talk with you about them, because they're questions that I think are fascinating, but clearly didn't have the time to bring them up here.
Part two.
I have a couple of people I have to do part 2 episodes with, so that might not actually be a bad idea. You just gave me an idea on how to stretch my content. Good job, Dakota. Will you be my manager?
Hey man, if you're offering me some of that pay, some of the money you're making from these videos or these podcasts.
I'm glad you
0
mentioned that
cents.
actually. I'm glad you mentioned that actually, because there's a guy who runs a very successful podcast who came on just to kind of talk about interesting things in his life. And I think because I scheduled with him, I got paid like $4.57 or something. It ain't much, but it did happen.
You know what? I'll take that 50 cents off your hands, give you a solid 4, and
we'll call it a deal. Oh, you know what? Yeah, maybe you'll see Dakota's names on all my legal documents, inexplicably. But no, we'll be back for a part 2 probably when Dakota has some free time, when I have some free time. But on that note, I want to thank you for coming on here, and thank God that you were able to be here at this time, because I kind of feel bad that I fucked the timing yesterday. So I'm just glad that we were able to get it worked out today. This is, I mean, my girlfriend was telling me, like, when we get our passports, the first place we have to go is Japan, because the thought process is if we could only go to one country and then for some reason we couldn't ever do it again, it would be a shame if that wasn't one of them, especially because all 3 years of Japanese in high school we took together. So it kind of helps that. You obviously talked with her a little bit about it when we were over there visiting you guys for the weekend.
It's an amazing experience. Like,
Yeah.
It is definitely, like, I would have to say it is the best experience of my life.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense. And much like 2 weeks ago when I was talking to Mariah about Israel, it's like a part of understanding a country is going to places outside of what the internet tells you to go to. So like the fact that you were able to kind of exist in a more country focused area certainly kind of enhances your experience by a lot more than I think a lot of people would realize. So. Even though I didn't get to look at a ton of your experience around that, it's just generally interesting to see. I mean, there's a lot of people going to a lot of different countries right now because a lot of my friends are able to secure opportunities to go do that. So it's very exciting to see kind of what they do when they're there, how things are different, just right. I don't know, kind of just anything about that. So I'm glad that I was able to take some time to kind of have this sort of talk with you. We'll probably come back for a second time. I know you don't really have anything to plug, so I'm going to plug my stuff, and then I'll let you say whatever you got to say. If you want to see any more of my content anywhere on the internet, why? No, I'm kidding. You can just look up DJ Cereal Sauce on any platform, either with spaces, with no spaces, or with underscores, and you'll find what you're looking for. If that's too hard, I have links in the description that you can go click on. We have a YouTube channel, we being our Nothing Is Anything crew. We have that. We have a podcast that we run called Nothing Is Anything. It's by the same name. And yeah, just go look at all the links. And what were you going to say, Dakota?
I just want to give a shout out to the only time that I got sick in Japan was due to my main man, Connor, who was a New Yorker who I happened to fucking bump into, who didn't tell anyone he was sick until we were already at dinner together. Shout out to him for being the only reason I got sick while in Japan. A fucking American.
Damn, that's fucking embarrassing.
Didn't wear a mask either. Just fucking free-balled coughing, like coughing and sneezing. Once we got to the restaurant, he hid it before we got there, but once we got there, he was like all over, and I was like, I leave in a week. I can't be sick.
I can't do this. Damn, that's rough. No, what I was gonna say is if I catch any of you calling us weeboos, I'm gonna find you.